Avoid befriending a fan. In Mean Girls, Regina George didn't have friends. Regina George had fans. And this is what led to her demise. Now, I also want to note this. You becoming acquainted with a supporter is completely different from you associating yourself with a fan. And the reason being that fan is actually short for the word fanatic. And when you look up synonyms associated with the word fanatic, synonyms such as obsessed and obsessive pop up. And when we think about those emotional states, they are intoxicating. So typically when someone is operating from a fanatic space, they lean from one extreme to another. So there's no real stability there. And furthermore, it's going to be really difficult for you to put your trust in your association with someone operating from this emotionally intoxicated state. On the flip side, you associating yourself with a supporter can admire and be inspired by you, but they also like something else about you that causes them to stick around whether you're experiencing an up season or a down season. So tying this back to, what I observed as I reflected on the film again, I think another reason for Regina's downfall is the fact she thought she could trust individuals that were actually her fans because she was under the impression that these people were also her friend. Now, I also want to break down this, and I stated this in another video where I broke down this film because I've covered this film a couple of times. I stated that the dynamic between Regina George and Gretchen was actually a mirror, in my opinion. It's just Gretchen presented in a more empathetic manner, so that made her more palatable to the general public. However, Regina, on the flip side, presented in a more apathetic and egotistical manner, so that typically repelled viewers and repelled people around her. However, they both had a knack for reading people and picking up on social cues. And they were also both exceptionally manipulative. They knew how to manipulate those around them. Except Gretchen understood the principle, you get more bees with honey, while Regina could care less. She just operated in her power and didn't care about the consequences afterwards. And I also think that this attributed to Regina's downfall. If you all are familiar with the excerpt in the book Green Eyes that dissects the importance of never underestimating yourself, I want to elaborate on that point. It's important to not underestimate other people also, especially in the context of being around people who are fans of you. Do not underestimate how far a person will go in order to replace you or to sabotage you. And this is why it's dangerous to call a fan a friend, because when they're operating from that emotionally intoxicated state, it's easy for them to switch up on you when you don't give them what they want. And that's the problem. When you allow someone to associate themselves with you in an intimate manner, in an intimate context, under the guise of a friendship, but they're actually a fan of you, the moment they do not get what they associated themselves with you for, they are quick to sabotage everything that you worked hard to build. Because the sole purpose of them associating themselves with you was to get something out of you. Now, I also want to be fair in this regard. There are some people who are not the quote-unquote villain, such as what Regina depicted in the film Mean Girls. Some people genuinely want to help their friends. I don't even want to go here. Some people genuinely want to help their friend and pour into their friend, but their friend just isn't gifted in the area that they are. And that's why their friend isn't seeing the same results. It's because that's not their lane. That's not what I would like to consider their quote unquote superpower. But because this person hasn't come to terms with that, and they haven't taken the time to shift their attention and pivot their attention and intentions towards what is actually for them, what they're naturally good at, they're going to start to resent you even though you have been helping them. And that's because their association with you is conditional. Now, I'm going to revisit the stages of envy excerpts in the book Green Eyes to depict this sequence further. Stages of envy. Aside from providing theoretical content, let's dive into some context. How can we identify an envious person and take necessary precautions? Well, let's identify a general sequence. Envy is often a result of progressive instances. More often than not, envy presents itself in a prevalent sequence. Through mere observation, this book identifies 5 concrete stages that seem to be consistent regarding interactions with envious persons. The stages are also sequential. So the first stage is admiration, and it reads adoration, inspiration, attraction. This is the stage where the envious person is seemingly enamored by you and what you have to offer. This can be your talents, your looks, your relationships. The envious person will admire these positive attributes initially. Stage 2, coveting. The next stage is coveting. This immediately follows the admiration stage because this is when the reality sinks in for the envious individual. This is when they realize that admiring your positive attributes is really them trying to live vicariously through them. When they face the harsh reality they are not you, the bitterness sinks in. The feelings of adoration quickly shift to feelings of covetousness. And then afterwards, there are additional stages that are marked with competition, jealousy, and envy. Now, here's the interesting thing about Regina's character. I believe she picked up on how other people perceived her. I think she knew that other people viewed her as someone who was powerful and as someone who was popular with a lot to offer. I think where Regina fell short is she overplayed her hand, for lack of better words. I think she was so fixated on her power, she was not assessing her group and her overall environment for potential threats. Now, another thing that I want to highlight is the dangers of putting your trust in people who secretly want your spot, who are fans of you, who secretly want your position. So that's why I felt compelled to differentiate a fan from a supporter earlier. Someone who supports you, they have a liking to you, a liking to your character, right? And as I stated before, they are willing to support you through seasons of success, but also seasons where you face many challenges. A fan, however, their presence and their association with you is conditional. Whether the conditions be that they get something out of their association with you, or if they feel like you hit a downward spiral, they're quick to leave. They're not going to stay around long. Now, to build upon what I was just now stating as far as Regina went wrong, where I feel like Regina went wrong was her putting her trust in people who were fans of her, not supporters, people who were associating themselves with her for an ulterior motive. I'm going to read from an excerpt in The Lion's Den, Navigating Systems of Power. If one wants to hold power over those around them, they will put themselves in a position where everyone has to answer to them. Most know that many would sacrifice their loyalty to a beloved friend in exchange for an opportunity presented by a foe. That is why those who seek powerful positions typically do not put their trust in friendships. Instead, they rely on their leadership. Now, to be realistic, because one thing that I'm always responding in the comments when people are just like, this is why I don't trust anyone now, and I'm completely shutting myself off. I get, the desire to maybe go through a little bit of an isolation season to heal and to recover, especially when you've been exposed to exploitation, people capitalizing on you, a lack of reciprocity. I completely get it, but I also want people to understand the nature of this channel and the nature of the resources that I plug on this channel is not designed to keep you in a corner to where you never explore any other relationship or opportunity. Instead, this is all designed to help you detect counterproductive relationships and opportunities so you will have room for healthy opportunities and relationships. So, with that being said, after breaking down that excerpt from the book In the Lion's Den, Navigating Systems of Power, when you are within a particular setting, professionally, right, or you're in a particular group, make sure that you have an outlet outside of that, where the playing field is even. People who are around you because they love you, people who have their own motion. That's how you receive what you put out, even if it's in a different area, in a different arena, amongst a different group of people. Because when you are operating in spaces where people are looking to you for answers or inspiration, it's typically lonely at the top. And to break this down, pay attention to a workplace setting, for example. Who are the colleagues and the coworkers typically surrounding themselves with in the break room, right? Or around lunchtime? It's typically not the supervisor or the manager. People are running away from the supervisor or the manager. The only time that we see people associating themselves with supervisors and managers in a friendly way is when the manager or supervisor initiates it. And it's because the person in a position of leadership and power typically present with authority, which can also be intimidating. So it's up to them to break the ice if they're interested in doing so. But for people who aren't interested in doing that, they want to keep it strictly professional, colleagues and coworkers are going to surround themselves with their peers, not the person who is calling the shots. The person who is calling the shots is in their office, making moves on the computer, making calls, checking all of the sheets to make sure everything is up to date, that people are meeting certain quotas, right? So when you understand that, it also helps you perceive the fact that, okay, as someone who is in a position of leadership and authority, I can't necessarily put my trust in this concept of friendship because people are looking to me for answers. But most importantly, people are looking to me for a financial opportunity to keep their job. We're not friends. I'm not the person that they prefer to associate themselves with when it comes to talking, when it comes to going out and hanging out. Even if there is someone who works under me who presents that as an opportunity, it's typically transactional. They want to do that so they can get in good graces with me, so they can get that promotion and get that raise. So looking at it objectively also encourages us to establish a strategy when we realize that there are certain people in an environment or within a particular setting where they're looking to you for inspiration, right? They might be inspired by you. They may be looking at you to lead by example. They may want to associate themselves with you in order to get something from you. It's important that you don't put your eggs in that basket, the eggs of friendship, the eggs of trusting in these people. This isn't the space for you to invest those assets into. You invest those assets in spaces where people are looking to you to support you. They're looking at you as someone who they love and that they care about, a real friend or an extension of family. So you have to be able to compartmentalize so you can protect yourself. And if you pay attention, this is why the quote unquote reference, right? The person who was looked at as the powerful one, the leader, the muse. This is why these people typically aren't given the luxury of being vulnerable. Because the moment you start to show that you are too human, for lack of better words, right? You're becoming too emotional. You start to present as if you don't have the answers. That's where people will start to jump ship because they're not associating themselves with you because they genuinely like you. They're associating themselves with you for transactional purposes. They want to get something out of you. There is some kind of power that you're exuding, some kind of leadership that you're exuding, and they need you to keep it together so that they can keep benefiting off of being associated with you. And the last thing that I want to discuss in relation to being cautious when you decide to befriend a fan is you have to be careful of someone who is using proximity to gain valuable information about you. They want to learn certain things about you so they can emulate it and essentially replace you. And to explain how this happens, I'm going to read from another excerpt in the book Green Eyes. The inferior. Now, this is an envious individual who is much more dangerous as they adequately assess their shortcomings and weaknesses, which means they typically have a thorough assessment of how to accomplish things in spite of their inadequacies. When dealing with an envious individual who sees themselves as inferior to you, you must always be cautious when dealing with this person because they are one of the opponents who are capable of outthinking and outsmarting the majority of their targets. Since this person acknowledges they will not be able to beat you in the area they are envious of you in, what they will do is use others as pawns to play into your demise or even influence you to partake in your own downfall. The purpose is to either replace you with themselves, or if they have assessed that may not be possible, they will simply invest in your demise. And when we connect that excerpt with the film Mean Girls, that's exactly what happened between Regina and Gretchen. Gretchen came to the conclusion that it was going to be difficult for her to hold a candle to Regina, but she concluded that Katie was a better shoo-in. And to tie all of this together, especially with me highlighting the dynamic between Gretchen and Regina, is the moment that Regina started to reject Gretchen's advances in the friendship and Gretchen reached her breaking point, it was quick for her to turn on Regina because she never viewed Regina as a friend. She viewed her association with Regina as social currency. And that's why it was so easy for her to utilize other people as pawns to ruin Regina's reputation. So in sum, babes, be careful with calling a fan a friend, because as soon as things don't go their way, or as soon as they don't get what they want out of you, they will soon become your worst enemy. All right, babes, that's all that I have for this analysis today. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. But of course, I want to hear you all's comments, opinions, perspectives, as well as experiences with something like this in the comment section below. I look forward to speaking to you guys in the next analysis, babes. Take care.